If you rely on motivation, your habits will fail. If you rely on willpower, they will collapse. This audiobook is about building habits that survive boredom, emotion, and time. Not because you feel inspired, but because they are who you are. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And today, you will learn how to build systems so simple, so aligned, and so repeatable that quitting stops being an option. This is not about trying harder. This is about becoming someone who no longer negotiates. Chapter 1. Stop trying to change your life. Stop trying to change your life. That command matters, because the instinct to change everything at once is the reason most people fail. They aim at transformation. They chase reinvention. They announce new versions of themselves. And then they quit. Not because they are weak, not because they lack intelligence, but because they are aiming at the wrong target. You do not change your life directly. That's the first principle. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. Say it again. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That's the key. Most people attempt radical change instead of structural adjustment. They want a new outcome without a new system. They want intensity instead of consistency. Intensity feels productive. It looks impressive. It creates stories. Repetition creates results. Here is the rule. Repetition beats intensity every time. That is not an opinion. That is observable reality. A single intense workout does nothing. A single focused day does nothing. A single burst of discipline changes nothing. What matters is what you do again tomorrow, and the day after, and when you are bored, and when no one is watching. You have a choice. You can chase moments, or you can build patterns. Moments feel powerful. Patterns change who you are. That's the key. People fail because they overestimate what one decision can do and underestimate what one repeated action becomes. So the first correction is this. Stop aiming at life change. Aim at behavioral structure. Life change is a byproduct. Structure is the cause. Here is another rule. Never redesign your life. Redesign your day. Your life is too large, too abstract, too emotional. Your day is concrete. Your day is repeatable. Your day is where leverage exists. If you want different results, you do not need a breakthrough. You need a schedule that does not depend on how you feel. It's not about motivation. It's about design. Say it clearly. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Discipline is not force. Discipline is structure you do not negotiate with. Most people negotiate with themselves constantly. That is why they lose. They ask, do I feel like it? They ask, is now the right time? They ask, what if I start tomorrow? You don't need their permission. Not from others. Not from your emotions. Not from your past. You have a choice. Here is the system correction. Lower the ambition. Raise the consistency. That sounds backward. It is not. Ambition without repetition is fantasy. Consistency without ambition is boring. Boring works. Boring is reliable. Boring compounds. That's the key. If a habit requires enthusiasm, it will fail. If a habit requires willpower, it will fail. If a habit requires a good day, it will fail. So here is the rule. Only build habits that can survive bad days. That means they must be small. They must be simple. They must be non-negotiable. People resist this because it bruises the ego. Small actions do not feel heroic. But you are not here to feel heroic. You are here to be effective. Effectiveness does not announce itself. It repeats itself. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That phrase is not motivational. It is mechanical. Your outcomes are mechanical. Your identity is mechanical. Your confidence is mechanical. They are built the same way, through exposure and repetition. So stop asking how to change everything. Start asking what you can repeat daily without discussion. That is the question that matters. Here is another rule. If you need to think about it, the habit is too big. Thinking creates friction. Friction creates delay. Delay kills consistency. Design habits that require no debate, no emotional preparation, no internal speech. Wake up. Execute. That is the standard. You have a choice. You can continue living in cycles of intensity and collapse, or you can commit to boring progress that does not stop. Most people choose intensity because it feels like effort. Effort is not the goal. Results are, and results come from what you repeat. That's the key. Let's be precise. A structural adjustment means changing. When something happens where it happens, what happens first, not how inspired you feel. Here is a usable system. Attach the habit to something that already exists. After you wake up, you do it. After you sit down, you do it. After you close the door, you do it. No decision point. No negotiation. This is how disciplined people operate. Not through force. Through sequencing. It's not about willpower. It's about order. Say it. It's not about willpower. It's about discipline. Discipline is choosing in advance, not deciding in the moment. The moment is unreliable. The system is stable. You don't need their permission. You don't need encouragement. You don't need to feel ready. You need a repeatable action that survives your worst days. That's it. If you take nothing else from this chapter, take this rule. Never measure change by how big it feels. Measure it by how often it happens. Frequency beats force. Structure beats enthusiasm. Repetition beats intensity. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. And when repetition accumulates, something else begins to shift. Not just your results, your self-image. You start to see yourself differently. Not as someone who tries, but as someone who does. That transition matters. Because habits that are not tied to identity will eventually be abandoned. That is where we're going next. In the next chapter, we will make this permanent. We will move from behavior to identity, from actions you perform to the person you become. Because identity always wins. Chapter 2. Identity always wins over intention. Intentions are weak. They sound good. They feel responsible. They collapse under pressure. Identity does not. This chapter corrects a common misunderstanding. People believe habits fail because of poor planning or low motivation. That is incorrect. Habits fail because they are not aligned with identity. That's the principle. The habit isn't what you do. It's who you're proving yourself to be. Say it again. The habit isn't what you do. It's who you're proving yourself to be. That's the key. Most people build habits to get something. Results, approval, relief, status. That approach never lasts. Why? Because outcomes are distant. Rewards are inconsistent. And pressure exposes what you actually believe about yourself. When effort increases, identity takes over. Here is the rule. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are, not who you want to be, not who you plan to become, but you believe you already are. This is why intention fails. I want to work out. I'm trying to eat better. I plan to focus more. These statements reveal uncertainty. They reveal negotiation. They reveal an unstable identity. Compare that to identity-based language. I train. I don't eat that. I don't miss my work. No drama. No explanation. No negotiation. You don't need their permission. Here is the example that makes this unavoidable. A person says, I'm trying to quit smoking. What happens? There's still a smoker who is resisting. Every craving becomes a fight. Every lapse becomes a failure. Another person says, I don't smoke. What happens? There is no fight. There is no identity conflict. The behavior follows naturally. Same external situation, different internal identity. That's the key. The habit isn't what you do. It's who you're proving yourself to be. This is not semantics. This is structure. If your habit requires constant restraint, it will fail. If your habit expresses identity, it will persist. So here is the correction. Stop asking, what habit do I want? Start asking, what type of person does this habit prove I am? That question changes everything. You have a choice. You can chase outcomes, or you can reinforce identity. Outcomes fluctuate. Identity compounds. Say it clearly. It's not about results, it's about discipline. Discipline is identity expressed through behavior, not behavior forced by emotion. This is why reward-based habits decay. Once the reward disappears, the habit disappears. Identity-based habits do not require rewards. The reward is alignment. Alignment produces calm. Calm produces consistency. Here is another rule. Never build a habit that contradicts how you see yourself. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you will prove it. If you see yourself as disciplined, you will protect it. Your mind works to remain consistent with identity. That is its priority. So your task is not to force behavior. Your task is to redefine identity in small, believable ways. Believable matters. You cannot lie to yourself. Your nervous system will reject it. So you do not say, I am unstoppable. That creates friction. You say, I'm the type of person who does this one thing daily. That is believable. That is repeatable. That's the key. Here is the system. Choose one habit. Make it small. Tie it to a clear identity statement. Not a goal, not a wish, an identity claim. For example, I am someone who keeps promises to myself. I am someone who shows up daily. I am someone who finishes what I start. Then prove it. Daily. Quietly. No announcements. No validation. You don't need their permission. This is how identity is built. Through evidence. Identity is not declared. It is demonstrated. Each repetition is a vote. Each vote reinforces belief. Miss enough votes, and identity weakens. Stack enough votes, and identity solidifies. That's the mechanism. So stop asking how to feel more motivated. Ask how to cast one vote today. You have a choice. You can act like the person you say you want to be, or you can keep rehearsing the identity you claim to outgrow. Here is another rule. Never use language that gives yourself an exit. I'm trying. I hope. I'll see how it goes. These phrases are escape hatches. They protect the ego. They destroy discipline. Replace them with identity statements. I don't miss. I don't negotiate. I don't quit. Not as bravado, as rules. Rules remove emotion. Rules create order. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Say it again. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Confidence follows evidence. Evidence comes from repetition. The habit isn't what you do. It's who you're proving yourself to be. This is why small habits matter so much. They're easier to repeat. They're easier to prove. Large habits fail because the identity claim is too large. The evidence collapses under pressure. Small habits survive, and survival builds belief. Belief builds identity. Identity sustains behavior. That's the sequence. If you skip identity, everything becomes harder. If you build identity first, discipline becomes natural. You do not rise to your intentions. You fall to your identity. That is the truth. So stop writing goal lists. Start writing identity rules. One behavior, one identity claim, one daily repetition. No debate. You don't need their permission. You don't need to feel ready. You need to act in alignment. This chapter sets the foundation. But identity alone is not enough. Even strong identity fails if habits are too fragile. If they collapse under boredom. If they collapse under emotion. That is what we address next. In the next chapter, you will learn how to build habits that survive boredom, resistance, and silence. Because consistency is not tested on hard days. It is tested on ordinary ones. Chapter 3. Motivation is a temporary drug. Motivation is unreliable. It arrives suddenly. It leaves without warning, and people confuse it with discipline. That confusion costs them years. Motivation feels powerful. It creates urgency. It creates confidence without evidence. That confidence is false. Here is the truth you must accept early. Motivation spikes create false confidence and inevitable crashes. That is not pessimism. That is pattern recognition. Motivation is emotional energy. Emotion is unstable. Anything built on it will collapse. Say this clearly. If you need to feel good to act, you will fail. Repeat it. If you need to feel good to act, you will fail. That's the key. Most people begin habits when motivation is high. They feel ready. They feel committed. They feel different. Nothing has changed. They confuse emotion with structure. Emotion fades. Structure remains. You have a choice. You can wait for motivation, or you can operate independently of it. Disciplined people do not feel more motivated. They feel less involved. They remove themselves from the decision entirely. That is the goal. Consider the most obvious example. New Year's resolutions. High motivation. Public declarations. Strong emotion. And then February. Nothing failed except the strategy. The habit required motivation to continue. So, when motivation disappeared, the habit disappeared. That's the pattern. Now compare that to boring routines. No excitement. No announcement. No emotional buildup. They run quietly. They survive holidays. They survive bad moods. That's the difference. One is fueled by emotion. The other is fueled by structure. Say it again. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Discipline does not mean force. Discipline means you do not ask yourself how you feel. You execute because it is scheduled, because it is defined, because it is part of who you are. Motivation asks, do I want to? Discipline states, this is what happens next. That's the key. Here is the rule. Any habit that requires motivation is already broken. It just hasn't failed yet. Motivation-dependent habits look strong at the beginning. They feel intense. They feel meaningful. Intensity is not durability. Durability comes from predictability. Predictability comes from removing emotion. So your task is not to feel inspired. Your task is to build habits that function when inspiration is absent. Because inspiration will be absent. You have a choice. You can design for ideal conditions, or you can design for reality. Reality includes boredom. Reality includes stress. Reality includes days where nothing feels important. If your habit cannot survive those days, it is not a habit. It is a mood. That's the correction. Here is another rule. Never start a habit on a high. Start on a normal day. High days lie to you. They make everything feel easier than it is. Normal days tell the truth. If a habit works on a normal day, it will work long term. This is why boring routines outperform exciting plans. Boring routines do not depend on belief. They depend on sequence. Wake up, execute, move on. No analysis. You don't need their permission. Not from friends who doubt you. Not from feelings that hesitate. Motivation tells you stories. Discipline gives you instructions. Stories change. Instructions repeat. That's the key. Here is the system correction. Replace motivation triggers with time and location triggers. Not when I feel like it, but at this time, in this place, after this action. That removes emotion from the equation. Emotion is volatile. Structure is stable. Say it clearly. It's not about emotion, it's about discipline. Discipline means you act even when the action feels empty. Especially then. People think progress should feel meaningful. It rarely does. Progress feels repetitive. Progress feels quiet. Progress feels unremarkable. That is why most people abandon it. They expect a feeling. They get routine. They quit. Here is the reframe. Routine is not a problem. Routine is proof. Routine means the habit no longer requires persuasion. That's the goal. You have a choice. You can chase emotional highs, or you can build emotional independence. Emotional independence is power. It means your behavior does not fluctuate with your mood. It means your standards do not change based on stress. That is self-mastery. Now consider this carefully. Motivation often shows up after action, not before. People wait to feel ready. They wait to feel confident. That delay keeps them stuck. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates evidence. Evidence creates confidence. Never reverse that order. Here is the rule. Act first. Let motivation catch up if it wants to. If it doesn't, continue anyway. That's discipline. Motivation is allowed to exist. It is not allowed to lead. Leaders do not follow moods. They follow systems. You don't need their permission. You don't need encouragement. You need a schedule that does not argue with you. Build that schedule. Keep it small. Keep it boring. Keep it fixed. That's the key. This chapter removes a dangerous illusion. Motivation is not the engine. It is the byproduct. If you rely on it, you will repeat the same cycle. Excited start, slow decline, quiet failure. If you remove it, progress becomes inevitable. Say it again. If you need to feel good to act, you will fail. But if you act regardless, something else happens. Your habits become stable. Your identity strengthens. Your emotions follow instead of lead. That prepares you for the next challenge. Because even disciplined habits can fail if they collapse under boredom. Motivation disappears quickly. Boredom lasts much longer. That is what we address next. In the next chapter, you will learn how to build habits that survive boredom, silence, and repetition. Because long-term success is not about hard days. It is about ordinary ones. Chapter 4, Build Habits That Survive Boredom. Boredom is the real enemy. Not difficulty, not pain, not complexity. Boredom. Most people believe they quit because something is hard. That is rarely true. They quit because nothing is happening. No feedback, no excitement, no visible reward. That silence exposes weak systems. Here is the truth. What you do when nothing is exciting determines everything. Say it again. What you do when nothing is exciting determines everything. That's the key. Difficulty creates resistance. Boredom creates abandonment. People can endure pain if they believe it matters. They cannot endure repetition if they expect stimulation. That expectation is the problem. Habits are not meant to entertain you. They are meant to condition you. Conditioning requires repetition without novelty. Professionals understand this. Amateurs do not. A professional trains on ordinary days. Not just when inspired. Not just when watched. They show up when nothing feels special. That is why they win. The amateur waits for excitement. The professional relies on schedule. You have a choice. You can design habits that depend on interest, or you can design habits that function without it. Only one survives long-term. Here is the rule. Never expect a habit to feel rewarding in the moment. Immediate reward is not the purpose. Adherence is. Boredom is not a signal to stop. Boredom is a signal that the habit is working. That sounds backwards. It is not. Boredom means the habit has moved out of novelty. It means you're no longer emotionally stimulated. That is where most people quit. Not because the habit failed, because it stopped entertaining them. That's the key. So the system correction is simple. Design habits that do not require excitement. Design habits that do not change. Same time, same place, same sequence. Variation is the enemy of consistency. Say clearly, it's not about excitement, it's about discipline. Discipline means you repeat the same action even when the action feels empty. Especially then. People misunderstand boredom. They treat it as a warning. It is not. Boredom is a test of whether the habit is anchored to identity or anchored to feeling. If it is anchored to feeling, boredom will break it. If it is anchored to identity, boredom will pass. The habit remains. You don't need their permission. Not from your emotions. Not from your attention span. Attention comes and goes. Standards do not. Here is another rule. Build habits that require presence, not passion. Presence means you show up. Passion is optional. Professionals are not more passionate. They are more consistent. They do not ask how they feel. They check the schedule. They train when it is ordinary. They train when it is dull. They train when it feels repetitive. That repetition creates mastery. Mastery is not exciting. Mastery is calm. You have a choice. You can seek stimulation, or you can seek stability. Stability compounds. Stimulation resets. Every time you change methods to feel interested, you reset progress. That is why people bounce between systems. New workouts, new plans, new routines. They are not advancing. They are restarting. Here is the correction. Do not change the habit to fix boredom. Change your expectation. Expect boredom. Plan for it. When boredom arrives, do nothing different. That's discipline. Say it again. What you do when nothing is exciting determines everything. Now, let's be precise. Boredom appears when the habit becomes predictable. Predictability is what creates momentum. Momentum is invisible. It does not announce itself. People quit because they cannot see progress. They confuse silence with stagnation. Silence is where growth happens. Roots grow underground, not above it. If you dig them up to check, they die. That's the metaphor. So here is a rule you will follow. Never evaluate a habit emotionally. Evaluate it structurally. Ask, did I show up? Did I complete the minimum? Did I follow the sequence? If yes, the habit succeeded. Feelings are irrelevant. It's not about enjoyment. It's about discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about enjoyment. It's about discipline. This is where many people become uncomfortable. They want progress to feel meaningful. They want growth to feel dramatic. It rarely does. Growth feels repetitive. Growth feels plain. Growth feels forgettable. That is why it works. Now consider this. Boredom removes ego from the process. There is nothing to show, nothing to post, nothing to celebrate, only execution. That is where identity solidifies. When you do the work without an audience, you prove something to yourself. The habit isn't what you do, it's who you're proving yourself to be. You are proving you are someone who continues without stimulation. That identity matters. You have a choice. You can quit quietly when nothing feels exciting, or you can continue quietly and become different. Here is another system rule. Set a minimum standard that feels almost too easy. Boredom is easier to endure when the demand is low. 1 page, 5 minutes, 1 repetition. You do not increase difficulty to fight boredom. You survive boredom through simplicity. That's the key. People think boredom means the habit is too easy. Often, it means the habit is correctly sized. Large habits break under boredom. Small habits persist. Persistence wins. You don't need their permission. You don't need validation. You need continuity. Continuity creates identity. Identity creates consistency. This chapter teaches you how to stay. Not how to start. Not how to feel inspired. How to stay. Because staying is the skill. But there's another threat to consistency. Not motivation. Not boredom. Emotion. Strong emotion disrupts systems if they are fragile. That is what we address next. In the next chapter, you will learn how to build habits that survive emotional swings without collapsing or overcorrecting. Because discipline must function on good days and bad ones alike. Chapter 5. Reduce the habit until failure is embarrassing. Most people fail because they overcomplicate. They attempt grand gestures. They design habits too large to sustain. That is the problem. If the habit feels daunting, it will fail. If the habit requires negotiation, it will fail. If the habit requires motivation, it will fail. You have a choice. Simplify, shrink, reduce. Here is the principle. Make the habit so easy that skipping it feels illogical. Say it again. Make the habit so easy that skipping it feels illogical. That is the key. Small habits remove resistance. They remove excuses. They remove negotiation. One push-up, one sentence, opening the notebook. That is enough. Not because it is dramatic, because it is repeatable. Consistency comes from repetition, not intensity, not force, not heroics. You do not need their permission, not from your emotions, not from anyone else. You have a choice. Shrink the habit. Anchor it to a sequence. Execute it daily. That is the system. Consider writing. Many people try to write 10 pages. They fail. They quit. They believe themselves incapable. Change one rule. Write one sentence. Not 10. Not 3. 1. The habit survives. The habit repeats. The habit builds identity. The habit isn't what you do. It's who you're proving yourself to be. Each repetition is a vote for that identity. Missing the habit feels embarrassing. The mind resists the violation. That is leverage. Reduce habits until failure is socially awkward for your own system. Your identity protects it. Exercise follows the same principle. One push-up, one squat, 1 minute of practice. Not exhaustion, not intensity, not performance. The habit is built. The system works. Momentum accumulates quietly. That is the difference between failure and persistence. Here is another rule. Reduce until resistance disappears. If it takes effort to start, shrink it. If it takes negotiation to execute, shrink it. If it feels optional, shrink it. Small is not weak. Small is inevitable. Small compounds. You have a choice. You can overdesign. You can overcomplicate. Or you can reduce. Reduction creates frictionless adherence. Adherence produces consistency. Consistency becomes identity. Think of it as a chain. Small habit, daily repetition, embedded identity, irreversible momentum. Here is the corrective mindset. Do not aim to impress. Aim to survive. Make habits survive boredom. Make habits survive emotion. Make habits survive the silent days. The micro-action is enough. The system is simple. Shrink the habit. Anchor it. Repeat. Do not debate. Do not rationalize. Do not postpone. You don't need their permission. You only need adherence. Here is an example. A notebook sits empty on your desk. You hesitate. It feels too much. Write one sentence. Close it. Repeat tomorrow. The habit survives. Failure is embarrassing. Progress is inevitable. This is the principle of irreversibility. Once repetition begins, the habit becomes identity. Identity reinforces repetition. That is the leverage no intensity can match. Here is the system rule. Identify the habit. Reduce it to a minimum unit. Anchor it to a reliable trigger. Execute daily without negotiation. Observe the system, not the outcome. Resistance is eliminated. Excuses are removed. Momentum becomes automatic. Make the habit so small, so obvious, so repeatable that skipping it feels like a violation of your own standards. That is the goal. Remember, small habits are not trivial. They are unstoppable. They are identity building. They are cumulative power. You have a choice. Overwhelm yourself and fail. Or shrink, repeat, and build something permanent. This is the foundation. The next chapter builds on this principle. Because habits do not just survive simplicity. They survive environment. The next lesson will teach you how to design your space, your schedule, and your triggers so failure becomes not only embarrassing, but nearly impossible. The habit is now ready. The system is next. Chapter 6. Design your environment to eliminate choice. Discipline is limited. Willpower is limited. Motivation is limited. Environment is not. The surroundings you create determine your behavior far more than your resolve. That is not opinion. It is observable reality. Here is the principle. The disciplined mind removes decisions in advance. Say it again. The disciplined mind removes decisions in advance. That is the key. Most people leave behavior to chance. They rely on reminders. They rely on moral reasoning. They rely on self-control. All of these are temporary. Your environment is permanent. Remove friction for what you want. Add friction for what you do not want. That is the system. Here is the first example. Phones. A phone within reach is a decision trap. You will check it. You will scroll. You will waste time. Move it. Out of reach. Out of sight. You have eliminated the choice. Discipline is no longer required. Next example. Clothing. Decide what you will wear for your morning routine the night before. Lay it out. No debate. No excuses. The habit executes automatically. The system wins. Workspace layout works the same way. Items you need for work, visible and accessible. Distractions, hidden or removed entirely. Behavior follows design, not motivation, not willpower, not intention. You have a choice. You can rely on self-control, or you can engineer your environment. Self-control fails under fatigue. Environment persists under fatigue. That is leverage. Here is the rule. Every habit should have a home, a physical anchor, a trigger, a context that removes negotiation. Do not rely on memory. Do not rely on enthusiasm. Do not rely on moral superiority. Design your environment to do the heavy lifting. The disciplined mind removes decisions in advance. Repeat it. The disciplined mind removes decisions in advance. That is the key. Let's examine another example. Work tasks. Keep tools where you use them. Keep steps in the correct order. Remove the need to think about what comes next. Discipline becomes frictionless. Execution becomes automatic. Small choices consume mental energy. Large choices destroy consistency. Every unnecessary decision is an opportunity to quit. Here is the system. Identify the habit. Determine what choices must be made to execute it. Remove as many choices as possible. Position tools, cues, and triggers to support immediate action. Do not overcomplicate. Simplicity creates consistency. You have a choice. You can fight yourself repeatedly, or you can build a structure that fights for you. Structure wins. Every time, consider meals. Healthy eating fails when decisions are made under stress. Prepare food in advance. Place it where you will see it. Remove tempting alternatives. The decision disappears. The habit executes automatically. Morning routines are identical. Evening routines are identical. Every friction removed strengthens the habit. You don't need their permission. You don't need motivation. You don't need energy. The environment acts. The system acts. You act because the structure compels you. Here is another example. Exercise. Place workout clothes in plain view. Set equipment ready to use. Remove the option to skip. Execution becomes automatic. The habit survives fatigue, boredom, and resistance. That is leverage. Here is the correction. Do not rely on willpower to create consistency. Willpower is limited. Environment is unlimited. Design once. Benefit daily. That is efficiency. That is discipline magnified. The disciplined mind removes decisions in advance. Repeat it again. The disciplined mind removes decisions in advance. Anchor every habit to a context. Anchor every habit to a visual or physical cue. Anchor every habit to simplicity. Behavior follows design, not emotion, not debate. not inspiration. Structure is stronger than strength. Order is stronger than effort. You have a choice. You can rely on yourself, or you can rely on a system. Rely on the system, because the system does not tire. The system does not forget. The system does not negotiate. It enforces habit automatically. Now consider the principle in sequence. Habit plus environment plus trigger equals consistent execution. That is the formula. Do not skip elements. Do not debate. Do not negotiate. Every element is necessary. This chapter sets the foundation for unbreakable repetition. Next, you will learn how to transform that repetition into a system of consistency that functions even when you do not feel disciplined. Because environment alone is not enough. It must combine with process. That is what we address in the next chapter. Chapter 7. Consistency is a system, not a personality trait. Consistency is not a personality trait. It is not a natural gift. It is not luck. Most people believe that consistent individuals are somehow born different, that they feel stronger, that they are more motivated, that they have more energy. That is false. Consistency is engineered, not inherited, not granted, not discovered. Here is the rule. Reliable people don't feel different. They live differently. Repeat it. Reliable people don't feel different. They live differently. That is the key. Consistency does not come from emotion. It does not come from inspiration. It comes from systems. The system is the habit stack. The system is the environment. The system is the sequence of actions executed daily. People who appear consistent are not exceptional. They are structured. They remove decision points. They remove friction. They remove negotiation. They follow rules. They follow processes. They do not debate. That is why they succeed. That is why ordinary people fail. Here is the principle. Consistency is predictable. It is deliberate. It is visible in the smallest actions repeated without fail. Consider routines. The reliable person wakes at the same time every day. They train regardless of mood. They work regardless of stress. No emotion is required. No motivation is required. The system carries them. The amateur waits for inspiration. The professional executes regardless. That is the difference. You have a choice. You can rely on willpower, or you can rely on systems. Willpower fluctuates. Systems do not. Here is another rule. Design for structure, not for feelings. Feelings follow execution, not the other way around. If you're consistent, your emotions adapt. If you are inconsistent, your emotions rationalize failure. Reliable people do not negotiate with themselves. They live differently. That is why consistency appears effortless. Now consider process. Consistency requires sequencing, a series of actions that follow one another automatically. Each step triggers the next. No thought, no deliberation, no debate. Wake, prepare, execute, record, rest, repeat. That is how ordinary behavior becomes extraordinary results. Here is the system rule. Identify your core habits. Sequence them logically. Anchor them to triggers or contexts. Execute daily without negotiation. Track adherence, not outcome. Consistency is a system, not a mood, not a talent, not an inspiration. This principle solves the largest problem with habit formation. People fail because they treat consistency as a feeling. They stop when emotion wanes. They stop when interest fades. They stop when energy drops. That is predictable. That is unnecessary. You have a choice. Build your habits into a system. Design for the day you feel tired. Design for the day you feel distracted. Design for the day nothing matters. On those days, the system carries you. Execution persists. Momentum continues. That is leverage. Reliable people don't feel different. They live differently. Say it again. Reliable people don't feel different. They live differently. Your life is the sum of repeated systems, not decisions made in peaks of motivation, not efforts made in bursts of discipline. System beats intensity every time. System beats personality every time. Here is the correction. Do not rely on who you are today. Rely on what you do daily. Personality is malleable. Systems are permanent. Every repeated action reinforces the next. Every skipped action weakens the chain. That is the mechanism. You don't need their permission. You don't need emotion. You need adherence. Consistency is not heroic. Consistency is predictable. Consistency is invisible. Consistency is effective. You have a choice. You can chase excitement and fail, or you can build systems and survive. Routines must run regardless of circumstances. That is the standard. That is the expectation. The system does not care about your mood. It does not care about your stress. It executes anyway. That is why consistency is sustainable. Small actions, repeated daily, become unstoppable. Systematized habits outlast motivation, emotion, and distraction. That is the principle. That is the rule. That is the design. Next, we address failure. Because even systems encounter disruption. Even structured routines face missed days. In the next chapter, you will learn how to recover from failure without losing momentum. Because consistency is not about perfection. It is about continuation. And continuation is not optional. Chapter 8, Never Miss Twice. Failure will happen. It is inevitable. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a part of the process. Most people react poorly to failure. They miss once, then they rationalize, then they miss again, and a new habit of avoidance forms. That is the spiral. You have a choice. You can treat failure as the end, or you can treat failure as a single event. Here is the rule. 1 miss is an event. 2 misses is a new habit. Repeat it. 1 miss is an event. 2 misses is a new habit. That is the key. Elite performers understand this principle. They fail. They fall short. They make mistakes. Then they recover immediately. No debate. No negotiation. No excuses. Because recovery is not optional. Continuation is not optional. Momentum is everything. Most failures do not matter in isolation. What matters is what you do next. You have a choice. You can quit after a setback, or you can return to the system immediately. The system does not forgive lapses. It does not require perfection. It requires adherence. That is discipline. Here is the principle. Never allow 2 consecutive misses. A single miss is a minor event. 2 in a row becomes a new pattern, a new identity, a new default behavior. Spirals form quickly. Resistance compounds. Excuses grow. Break the chain immediately. That is leverage. That is control. That is self-mastery. You don't need their permission. You don't need to feel ready. You simply act. Here is an example. An athlete misses a training session. 1 day lost is not catastrophic. 2 days lost begins a habit of absence. 3 days lost signals a collapse in discipline. Recovery happens on day 1, not day 2, not when motivation returns. Day 1, that is the principle. Small lapses do not define you. Patterns do. That is why the rule exists. Never miss twice. Repeat it again. Never miss twice. Let your actions correct the error. Do not negotiate. Do not wait for a better moment. Return to the habit immediately. No discussion. No justification. No delay. Momentum is preserved. Spirals are avoided. Consistency remains intact. This principle applies to every habit, every system, every sequence of action. Missed work, missed exercise, missed study. The rule remains, never miss twice. Here is the system. Track adherence. When failure occurs, Acknowledge it as a single event. Resume immediately with the next repetition. Reinforce identity with proof of continuation. Do not wait for confidence. Do not wait for readiness. Do not rationalize. Immediate return is the system. Elite performers do not seek perfection. They seek correction. They seek continuity. They seek adherence. That is the difference. Remember, one miss is an event. Two misses is a new habit. Say it again. One miss is an event. Two misses is a new habit. Your identity forms in the space between misses. Your habits survive in the gap between lapses. This principle is simple but unforgiving. Ignore it and the spiral begins. Follow it and failure loses power. Next, you will learn how to track the process without obsessing over outcomes. Because adherence, not results, is what creates permanence. And permanence is the goal of every habit. Chapter 9. Track the process, not the outcome. Most people measure the wrong thing. They measure results. They measure visible progress. They measure applause. That is a mistake. Results are delayed. Outcomes lag. Feedback is often slow, inconsistent, and misleading. If you track results alone, you will be frustrated. You will abandon the system. You will confuse luck with skill. You have a choice. Track the process. Track adherence. Track what you control. Here is the rule. You don't measure success, you measure adherence. Repeat it. You don't measure success, you measure adherence. That is the key. Systems compound. Results are the byproduct. Execution is the lever. Consistency is the force multiplier. Consider the example, repetitions. A writer tracks sentences written, not book sales, not praise, not recognition. An athlete counts reps, not medals, not accolades. Adherence to the action is the only reliable signal. Every repetition adds to the system. Every repetition reinforces identity. Every repetition compounds over time. Outcomes will eventually follow, but they cannot be the driver. The system is the driver. Here is another rule. Never judge a habit by immediate results. Immediate results are noisy. They fluctuate. They distract. They undermine discipline. Track what is predictable. Track what is repeatable. Track what you can control. The habit is measurable. Your action is measurable. The results will arrive. You have a choice. Chase outcomes and fail to sustain, or follow the process and allow results to accumulate silently. Consider a calendar. Each day you execute, mark it, a check mark, a dot, a simple note. That is adherence. That is evidence. That is feedback that does not rely on emotion or opinion. Do not track emotion. Do not track inspiration. Do not track approval. Track the action. Track the system. This is why elite performers succeed. They track inputs. They execute outputs without distraction. They allow the compounding effect of repetition to produce outcomes later. Here is the principle. Small, consistent actions are invisible at first. Compounding makes them unstoppable. Checking off repetitions is not trivial. It is evidence. It is proof. It is leverage. You don't need to feel success immediately. You don't need applause. You need adherence. Momentum is created by action, not observation. Consistency is reinforced by evidence, not feeling. Here is the system. Identify the core habit. Define a measurable action. Track each execution. Ignore the result for now. Let the system compound over time. This is the opposite of short-term thinking. It is long-term engineering. It is identity building. It is discipline made visible. You have a choice. Measure outcomes and become reactive, or measure adherence and become proactive. Reactive people chase illusions. Proactive people build systems. That is the difference. Repeat it again. You don't measure success. You measure adherence. This mindset removes frustration. It removes negotiation. It removes excuses. Every check mark is proof of identity. Every completed repetition is a vote for the person you are becoming. Do not allow the absence of visible results to alter your behavior. Results are delayed. Your identity and system are immediate. This chapter prepares you for permanence, because even the best systems fail if they are not tracked. Tracking adherence, not outcome, ensures continuity. Next, you will learn how to internalize these habits, how to move from daily execution into identity, so that habits no longer feel like effort. They simply become who you are. The final chapter ties all of this together. It transforms repetition, environment, adherence, and identity into irreversible self-mastery. Chapter 10. Become the type of person who doesn't stop. Habits are more than actions. Habits are votes. Votes for the type of person you are. Long-term habits create irreversible identity shifts. They do not just produce results. They redefine who you are. Here is the principle. Eventually, effort disappears and identity remains. Repeat it. Eventually, effort disappears and identity remains. That is the key. Most people stop short. They build habits temporarily. They rely on willpower. They wait for motivation. And when it fades, so do they. You have a choice. You can be someone who starts, or you can be someone who continues. Identity is not built in bursts. It is built in quiet, relentless repetition. It is built when no one is watching. It is built when boredom comes, when fatigue comes, when emotion disappears. That is where real transformation occurs. Here is the rule. Design habits that become part of your identity, not part of your effort. Exercise, writing, study, work. Start small. Repeat daily. Anchor to context. Track adherence. Over time, the habit no longer feels like discipline. It is normal. It is automatic. It is you. The person who completes the habit does not debate it, does not negotiate it, does not rely on feeling. They execute. They persist. They continue. This is irreversible. Once identity shifts, the system carries you forward, even when external circumstances challenge you, even when emotion fails you, even when life becomes ordinary. That is power. You have a choice. You can fight against yourself every day, or you can become the type of person who doesn't stop. That is the standard. That is the expectation. Remember, eventually, effort disappears and identity remains. Repeat it one more time. Eventually, effort disappears and identity remains. Anchor your habits. Anchor your environment. Anchor your identity. The system is now permanent. Discipline becomes effortless. Momentum becomes unstoppable. You're no longer the person who negotiates. You're the person who executes. You are the person who continues. Even when it is boring. Even when it is difficult. Even when nothing feels exciting. That is the ultimate form of self-mastery. Now, take action. Apply every principle. Shrink habits until failure is embarrassing. Remove decisions from your environment. Track adherence, not outcomes. Never miss twice. And commit to building identity through repetition. You do not need their permission. You do not need motivation. You only need to act consistently. Start today. Start now. Because the person you're becoming is watching silently. Finally, if you want more content like this, strategies to master habits, systems, and identity, subscribe to this channel. Activate notifications so you never miss an audiobook designed to condition your mind for lasting change. Consistency is not temporary. Discipline is not optional. And identity does not negotiate. You're ready. Now go build the life that cannot be stopped.